Okay, so tonight we are going to be in lesson 6.1, which is all about sibling relationships. And I always like to preface kind of this lesson by saying that, this lesson might not apply to everyone because maybe you only have one child at home, or maybe you yourself don't have siblings, or, maybe this doesn't relate to the specific dynamic that your family has. But I'd always encourage you to kind of think about it more broadly and think, okay, maybe do my kids or does my child have cousins that they interact with a lot? Or could I relate some of this to, just some of their friends and some of the things that happen between, peer relationships too? There's a lot of ways to kind of extend this. And also thinking back to when you were a child. And so if you have siblings, then kind of as we're going through different topics, thinking about, your childhood as well. So some of the assignments that we go through might be more specifically related to siblings and things like that, but you are free to kind of expand that to whatever dynamic sort of makes sense for your family. So just want to let you guys know about that, and you can go ahead and flip to this lesson in your workbook. Our classroom agreement: being on time for each class session, completing all required assignments. We do have our study hall this Thursday from 4 to 6. We will be there at the office, and so you are more than welcome to swing by, and we're happy to help you get caught up on any assignments that you need assistance with. Or if you just want to do a quick check-in, you're welcome to come by. So please feel free to let us know that you're going to come, and we'd be happy to meet with you. Letting me know if you're going to be absent, making sure your microphone stays off the entire time unless you are sharing something, and feel free to utilize the chat as well. And that's a good reminder that making sure you're kind of checking the chat box too, in case Raven reaches out to you or sends you a message, or, if I reach out to you, if I have a question, we do utilize the chat a lot. So even if you aren't sharing something, make sure you're kind of following along and keeping up with that chat box as well. And of course, just making sure that everything is family friendly, all the things that you say and everything that's in your background. And then lastly, these sessions will be recorded. Okay, and this is just a nice, peaceful, serene image for us to look at to kind of lead us into emotion regulation. I'm gonna kind of open it up to Raven right now, and she's gonna share a few things, and then I think we're going to do kind of a brainstorm together, and I'm going to, hopefully you guys will share some ideas about emotion regulation that you have as well. So I'll pass it to you, Raven.
So I just had something really small that stuck with me that I personally learned from another parent while teaching this class. Because like I said, we all learn from each other, and I had never really utilized doing it before, but I thought it was a really neat idea. And so it works for small kids. And so it's just the idea when they're kind of tantruming or like just, kind of losing it, or like really overly, some little girls kind of get excessively crying, right, when they fall down and kind of hyperventilate and stuff like that. And so it was just a cute little trick that I picked up, and I thought it was cool. And so I always like to share, and it's kind of doing the eat the cupcake. So you do that little motion with them, eat the cupcake, and they're breathing in, right? And then they blow out the candle, and then they do eat the cupcake, and so it's like something you just get down to their level. And I just found it could be really helpful. And I just thought, has anybody else ever done anything like that with their kiddos? Or this is kind of a good time to share, like, what have you guys done in those moments where your kiddos are having a high emotion moment and we need to kind of come down to their level? Like, is there anybody that's willing to share something that they have done with their kids, maybe in the chat, or if you want to just jump in on your microphone, feel free. Or have you heard of the eat the cupcake, blow out the candle? Has anybody heard of that one? I got nothing here.
I've heard a variation of that, Raven. I would always tell my students when I was teaching that they would smell the flower and then blow out the candle. So really similar. But I think that there's different versions.
Different variations. Yeah, and in the chat, Kristen said her son actually taught her this. So they use that all the time. So that's good to know. Maybe something that the schools are teaching. Does anybody else have anything small? Just something when we talk about doing, leading from our feet all the way up to our bodies, not all our little kids are going to be able to do those kind of long emotion regulation exercises. So it's just good to know that you can have these simple little tools that somewhat can help. And, like Shar said, she's never heard of the cupcake blowout before. So that's kind of new for her hearing that. I've heard of the flower, like Miranda said, but so just anything fun like that, or you can make up your own. So it's kind of a creative way to make something. That's kind of what I got for tonight.
Yeah.
If anybody else wants to share, I don't see any other chats. If anybody wants to jump in.
Oh, that's perfect. Thanks, Raven. I think that it's just a good reminder that we can simplify a lot of things to help kind of meet the level of where our kids are at. And also, honestly, that simple phrase of eating the cupcake and blowing out the candle, or smelling the flower and blowing out the candle, sometimes as adults, we just need something quick and brief and short to help us as well. So I'd encourage you to use that on yourself if you need a quick sort of emotion regulation as well. All right. So we'll go ahead and keep moving forward. I'd love to know, how is everyone feeling today? If you want to share an I feel statement, you can do it in the chat, or you're welcome to share it out loud. Like Jaden said, it's been a tough week. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. It's kind of felt like, I know it's only Monday, but I had a very busy weekend, and I feel like, man, it's only Monday, but it sort of feels like it's starting to be Thursday or Friday, because I've felt like I've had a lot going on. Oh, and he said this class has been a blessing. I'm so glad to hear that. Thank you for sharing. Someone else said, I think Lulu said, I feel tired. Yep, I feel tired too. And she said too much candy and stayed up late. Oh yeah, yesterday was Halloween. Would anyone like to share something fun they did on Halloween? Maybe you went trick-or-treating. I know Raven's kids dressed up in super cute costumes and went trick-or-treating, and they had a ton of fun. Oh, Miss Angie said Uber driver. I guess, were you driving? Maybe she was driving Uber last night. Feeling happy tonight, celebrating Day of the Dead. Oh yes, that is today. That's really cool that you're able to celebrate that. That's awesome. Very cool. Let's see, McKenna says, I feel hopeful, and even though nothing has actually happened yet, I somehow already feel relieved. I had my screening today for housing assistance, so I may finally have a place soon, which gets me out of my car, and my daughter can sleep in the same place as me. Oh, McKenna, that's so great. I hope that that all works out, and I'm just so glad you feel so hopeful about it. I'll be thinking about you, and please give us an update as you learn more. Oh, and Jaden said, my wife did switch bucks. I've never heard of that. So she would switch candy for toys, and we would eat the candy. That is super funny. Anyone else have any any tricks to have your kids share their Halloween candy with you?
I have to say, I want to steal his idea, because that seems like a really smart idea.
Absolutely. I know, I just went out to a restaurant yesterday, and they were giving out Halloween candy just to all the customers, and I was thinking, man, I don't have candy lying around the house anymore, but sometimes it just sounds really good. Walter said, unfortunately, he doesn't see his kids right now. Walter, I'm sorry to hear that, and I know that you're not alone in that too. So I hope that that changes for you in the future. But just know that there's other people in similar situations too. Thanks for sharing that. All right. Well, thank you all for sharing. That was kind of fun to see what everyone was up to. Okay, so like I said, we are in lesson 6.1 tonight, and we'll be talking a lot about sibling relationships. So I'm going to go ahead and start with our takeaway messages for today. The first one is that parents can support the growth and development of all the children in their home by acknowledging negative feelings and treating children as individuals rather than comparing them positively or negatively with their siblings. So we will talk a lot about kind of comparisons between your kids or between children in your household. Maybe you have biological siblings in your household, or maybe you have cousins that live in your household or step siblings or whatever that looks like. We're going to talk about why it's so much more effective and encouraging for your kids to treat them as individuals rather than kind of comparing them, even in ways that seem positive sometimes. And then the second one is that parents can nurture all the children in their family by acknowledging and validating each of their children's experiences of the world. So talking a lot about how we can really treat our kids as individuals and recognize them for who they are as being their own person, and making sure that we are not comparing and not kind of putting kids in certain boxes or giving them certain labels based on, how we're comparing them with their siblings. And so we're going to talk just a lot about how we can support our kids as individuals tonight, and kind of go from there. So you can go ahead and jot down a learning goal for this lesson 6.1. And two examples that I have are, I want to think of 3 new ways to treat my children as individuals. So maybe you think, that's actually something I want to work on. Maybe you want to get some ideas on how to do that. And the second one could be, I'd like to learn how, there's a typo in there. I'd like to learn new ways to focus on the positive qualities of each child. So really honing in on finding the positive. So those are just 2 examples, but kind of any general learning goal about parenting siblings would be appropriate for this. So I'll give you guys a minute or 2 to jot down that learning goal, and then we'll come back together.
Sorry to interrupt, guys, but having issues with 25-year-old child doing something in my home that was unacceptable behavior. And then her being verbally and physically threatening me with bodily harm tonight is just uncalled for.
Oh, Shar, I am so sorry to hear that that's been going on. I hope that it gets kind of reconciled and moves in a positive direction soon. I'm sorry to hear that. Okay, we'll go ahead and wrap this part up and go to the first part of our lesson for today. So I'm going to have you guys find this page in your workbook. It's called Tips for Parenting More Than One Child. Maybe you could give a quick thumbs up once you've got to this page. Oh, and McKenna, I love seeing your little one on the screen there. That is so much fun. It's always my favorite when we get to see little little faces on there. Hi. So sweet. I love it. Okay, so yeah, we're going to go ahead and go through kind of each of these three categories. We're first going to talk about the importance of acknowledging all feelings, and we'll break that down in more detail. And then we're going to talk about treating children as individuals and avoiding comparisons. And then lastly, we're going to talk about giving according to individual need and avoid trying to treat equally, which sounds kind of interesting when we say that, but we'll talk more in depth about what that looks like. So first, we're going to go ahead and talk about acknowledging all feelings. And we have discussed this a lot in regards to emotion regulation and things like that. But I want you to think about this question. What happens when you're feeling maybe like really powerful negative emotions and you're with someone who discounts or tries to talk you out of those feelings? I know we've touched on this before, but I want to kind of bring it up again. How do you feel when you're just overcome maybe with sadness or anger and someone just discounts and says, you shouldn't be feeling that way, or I think you're overreacting? How do we feel in that situation? Anyone like to share? Does it feel good or does it feel not so good? What do we think when someone discounts how we're feeling? Well, I know for me, that's not a situation that I, really want to be a part of. It just makes me feel worse. Kirsten said it makes you feel like the person doesn't value you or that you're unimportant. It might provoke a reactive behavior. Yeah, that's a super important one. Of maybe it will cause you to respond in a way that you don't want to respond in. Yeah, absolutely. It makes people angry. I feel like people can be selfish. Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. So what happens when you're feeling maybe these negative emotions, but you're with someone who listens to you? What's the difference? How do we feel now? And then Amanda had said for that first question, it lowers her self-esteem. Absolutely. What about the opposite? What if someone validates how we're feeling? Then how might we feel or how might we respond? Miss Angie says she feels heard. Yep, absolutely. I know for me, it just kind of makes me feel better. It makes me feel like, okay, I'm not crazy. Because I know sometimes for me, if I have a really strong negative emotion, I can think, oh, am I being crazy, or am I overreacting, or am I don't know, just being too much right now. But when someone just kind of validates you, it makes you just think, okay, I can handle this, or someone understands, or at least is able to empathize with me in a way. And I just kind of makes me just feel better. Yeah, it makes it easier to get through this extreme emotion. Absolutely. Yeah, these are great. So the same is true for our kids when our kids are going through things like that. And I know someone mentioned this the other day, but talking about how, man, if our kids have, a really negative experience, maybe they're at school or it's just something goes wrong. And to us, it seems like a really small thing. Like maybe they were waiting in line to go on the swings at recess and the teacher blew the whistle and it was time to come inside and they didn't get a chance to go on the swings. It would be easy for us just to say, oh, well, you can do it tomorrow, or it's not a big deal, or you could just go play something else. But if you're that child who's been waiting all of recess to play on a swing and then you don't get to do it, it really is a big deal. And so helping us to kind of think from their perspective and realize, oh man, that is really valid. And in their little hearts and their little minds, that is a really big deal to them. And so kind of just shifting the way that we think and acknowledging feelings and thinking, I have things that make me feel bummed out if I don't get to do them. Same thing is true for our kids. Amanda, I see that you had your hand up. Would you like to share something?
So like today I learned like something very very important going along with like the lesson.
Mhm.
I feel like the last thing on the page, giving according to individual need, I feel that this really does go along with consequences and like punishment and stuff, because sometimes like, you know, kids are individuals. The way that you may like discipline one child may not work for another.
Mhm.
And I got reprimanded today just by like my caseworker because of stuff going on in my life, that I needed to correct my children the same way. And like I kind of said to her, that's not going to work because, you know, my child that has ADHD and other
Hold on, baby.
issues and stuff like that, it doesn't work for him to force him to sit because he's hyperactive.
Mhm.
And she got mad at me, and I was just like, well, he's an individual, so let him express his individuality and everything. And she got mad at me about it. And I said, again, my child is an individual. Please
Mhm.
understand that what works for one child does not work for another. Like, I know my children, you need to respect me. No disrespect to you, but that's just how it is.
Mhm.
And I will just say that this is really important stuff, guys, for you to like pay attention to, because you don't want to not stand up for your kids, and that's what I was doing by letting them be who they are. And I feel that's very important to let them be who they are.
I'm so glad that you brought that up, Amanda. I think that that's so true in thinking about, yeah, I mean, it can be really hard, I think, with consequences to want to make things fair for your kids, but also recognize that they're individuals, and at the same time, they're not going to respond to discipline in the same ways. And that is very true for our kids. And so I think that that makes sense in what you're saying of, I know that my one child is not able to do this and this does not work for him. And I would just, encourage you to, you know your kids the best, like you said. And Raven and Smith, I always say this too, that you are all experts. You're experts on your kids. And so you know kind of the ins and outs of their personality, and you know what things kind of work for them as far as, you know, privileges, and what things work for them as far as discipline. And so taking the time to realize this is kind of the strategy that works for you, but this, you know, might work for you. And I would also say when kids are different ages, you know, consequences might look slightly different when they're different ages too, because they can handle more responsibility as they get older. So thank you for sharing that. I am so sure that lots of people can relate to that as well. This is so great. Thank you all for sharing everything in the chat and everything. I love getting to see. As Angie said, how do you keep it fair when you have a boy and a girl that are only 15 months apart in our teens? I love that question. I'm going to save it because we are in a couple minutes going to talk about more in detail about kind of giving according to individual need. So we're going to come back to that question. I'm not going to forget about it. And if I do forget about it, remind me, Miss Angie, we'll come back to it in just a minute. But I do want to go ahead and finish up where we are about acknowledging feelings here. So what we're going to do is you're going to go back to that page that we were just on. And at the top where it says acknowledge all feelings, there's just a couple questions we're going to go through. And over here where it says important idea, we're going to read through those, and then you're just going to respond in your own way on the right side of that column. So children have lots of feelings when new children are added to the family. So that's one thing we want to think about. Is maybe there's a dynamic shift in your family, and there's like a brand new baby that's born, or there's a step sibling that moves in, or something like that, or just a shift in what the family looks like. And that's one thing that could cause them to kind of have a lot of extra emotions and a lot of extra feelings. And so that's one scenario we want to be aware of and be really sensitive to if that's happening in our family. And children have a harder time managing strong feelings when we try to talk them out of those feelings. So if we're trying to say, you're overreacting, or you shouldn't feel that way, or it's not really a big deal, they're not learning how to regulate their emotions. We're not being an emotion coach by doing that. We are telling them that their feelings aren't important, when actually, if you're the only child in a family, then all of a sudden there's a new baby coming, that is turning your whole world upside down. And so that's a really big deal. And maybe to us as adults, we've had more time to process these types of things, but our kids haven't. And so I'm just using that one example, but there's a lot of things that kind of could be true for that. And then to help children cope with family changes, we need to let them know that their strong feelings are okay and that we understand. This helps them make room for more positive feelings. So the example that we're using is just kind of the one I mentioned. This is just for the sake of this assignment, but there's probably endless different scenarios that you are all having in your family too. So on the right side, the scenario that we're going to talk about is if there's a child that doesn't want his mom to have another baby, but that's what's happening, there's a new baby coming into the family. How might you as a parent validate their feelings? What's a sentence that you could say to them that would make them feel kind of encouraged or validated in that? Go ahead and jot down an idea that you have for that. Amanda, go ahead.
Basically, because I am personally very experienced with this.
Yeah.
When my sister found out, like when my daughter found out that she was going to be a big sister, I just said, "You're going to be a big sister. You're going to be able to show them so much things. They're going to learn from you. This is going to be awesome." And she's like, "Well, I'm not sharing my toys." And I'm like, "Well, that's okay. He'll be too little to play with your toys anyways." And when I had him and everything, she was just very protective. It was like, "He's my baby. Nobody's going to hurt him." And they're still very, very close to this day. And if anything happens to like Cerulean, she gets very upset and everything about it. And like they're just great. But one thing that I've learned from my daughter is sometimes it's okay, like if you need a break, it's okay to entrust your children to be there to like help their sibling and stuff, which is really nice with Lana. And I'm really, really thankful that I have that from her.
Sure, that's great. I love that. So I think that's probably really a common thing for kids, of saying that's a normal fear for them. Oh, I don't want to have to share my toys, or I'm worried that this is going to happen. And I think that was great, all the things that you said. And also, you know, just saying things like, "Oh, it makes sense that you would be concerned about that," or just like letting them know that that's a really valid concern. Absolutely. Let's go down to letter B. What about the situation if there's a child that doesn't want his dad to remarry or move in with a new partner? So maybe there's a shift in what the parent situation looks like. Maybe there used to be two parents and now there's one, or there used to be one, now there's going to be a step parent. What's something we could say that would kind of help validate or encourage them in this? Go ahead and jot down a thought, and then we'll talk through that together. So I kind of have jotted down a couple things that you could say in response, but you don't have to. For the situation where maybe the child doesn't want his mom to have another baby, you could say something like, "I understand you didn't choose for this to happen. Let's talk about how you feel about having a new baby." So just leaving it really open and saying, "Yeah, this isn't what you chose, or maybe what you didn't want to have happen. Let's talk about it," and not trying to tell them to feel a certain way. And then for the second one, saying kind of a similar thing. "I understand this change isn't what you would have chosen. Let's talk about how you feel about moving in with this person." So there's a lot of things you could say. That's just kind of two examples. But the more that we can leave it kind of open-ended and just let the kids share how they're feeling and just listen and be have really open ears to what they have to say, that's going to give them the space to feel like, okay, I don't like this, but at least I know that mom or dad is listening to me and they know how I feel. Would anyone like to add to that? And Walter was just expressing that it sounds like he, waits a really long time to introduce maybe a new partner to kids because they can get attached, and that absolutely makes sense. That's a really respectful way to go about that, making sure that you're keeping your kids' feelings really, really up as a top priority. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next section of this, which is treating children as individuals. So I want you to think about this question. Were you ever compared positively or negatively to a sibling? Like, did your parents ever kind of say, oh, you are so much better at this than your sister? Or, oh man, I wish that you would do that, kind of like your brother did. Has anyone experienced that maybe when you were a child? If anyone wants to share, they're more than welcome to. Thinking back to our own childhoods. Mazzy said all the time, yeah. Kirsten said, yes, my mother did this and still compares me with my siblings. Yeah, sometimes it doesn't even end when we become adults, absolutely.
Right, just different things to compare, so.
Yeah. Definitely. So it looks like some of us can for sure relate to this. And then let's see, what else did I miss maybe here in the chat? Jaden says, one has the heart and art and the other has the intellect and focus. And so I try not to compare. I loved how you kind of were talking about the really positive things about both kids. I love that. And trying not to compare. My mom said that my dad was nicer to me than my step siblings. Oh, interesting. Yeah. So sometimes, yeah, bringing in extra dynamics to that, absolutely. It can be a really tough thing for sure, and it goes to show that those things stick with us and we remember them, because if that happened when we were really young and we're still able to kind of remember that and think about it, it's a good reminder that, oh, things that we say to our kids right now too, they're going to remember that we probably when they were adults. So just kind of one way to think about it too. So here's an example of kind of what a positive comparison could look like. And that would be, I wish your brother would work as hard as you do in school. So the child that you're talking to is in some way getting a compliment, but it's at the at the same time putting down the sibling. And so that's not a good way to do it. You can compliment your child individually and say, you are working so hard in school, I'm so proud of you, and not even talk about anyone else in the family. So while positive comparisons at first glance might seem like, oh, that's not a bad thing, it really isn't great because it's bringing down somebody else in that process. And then a negative comparison could be something like, why can't you work as hard as your brother and get good grades too? So similar situation, but in this scenario, this child is not working very hard and is now feeling worse about themselves because they're already being told they're not working hard enough. And on top of that, they're being compared to their sibling. So both of these have negative impacts on all the children involved. And so that's kind of why we try to avoid using those comparisons. Let's see. Yeah, and so I think Walter can relate some. He said, I wasn't good at school. I didn't get good grades. My sisters got A's and B's. I got married first and my parents compared my sisters, asked me why they weren't married yet. So kind of seems like it kind of came full circle. Maybe you got compared negatively when you were a child, but then it kind of flipped when you were an adult because you were doing something that they weren't doing. Yeah, I'm sure not the only one that's experienced that. And Jaden says mixed families are tough. Yeah. And I think, did someone, Amanda, did you raise your hand again, or was that still from earlier? I'm not sure.
I did. I was just gonna say I tried to avoid comparing my children as much as possible and using terms like that because I feel like it is kind of like abusive in my opinion, because it causes like self-esteem and it can cause like other disorders and stuff to approach, like depression and stuff like that. which is something that I really want to be mindful with my own kids, as well as like my friends' kids and stuff like that, just because there's a lot of dangers out there when it comes to stuff like that. And especially when you have kids in school that may be teenagers, like doing something like that or comparing them to another kid can make them feel like worthless and stuff like that, and just really can cause them to become depressed and everything. And that's not something that anybody wants to feel.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good point. Of one of the reasons, one of the main reasons that we try to avoid comparisons is because it really can affect kids emotionally and mentally. And if they are hearing these phrases out loud and they're replaying them in their head thinking, oh, why am I not as good as my brother? Or why is my sister always way better at this than me? That can stick with them, and they can start to kind of believe these things that aren't true about themselves. And that can lead, like you said, to a lot of, really negative self-esteem issues. So absolutely.
So we have a couple chats
yeah,
going
go ahead,
here. So like the last one Miss Angie just said was, what about honor roll certificates? One kiddo gets it and you want to celebrate their victory. How do we spare the siblings' feelings? Are we supposed to? So that's kind of a good point. To at what expense, right? So I think something like that is definitely different, right? So as long as you're not throwing the other kiddo under by saying, like, why aren't you on the honor roll like your brother or something to that extent, everybody should be still celebrated for, what they did, because we all have different positive qualities, right? And so a couple people already attested to that on here about, siblings that are a little bit better at grades and they have, a little bit easier time with school. So I think that was a good one. What else is on here? Quite a few chat things here, Miranda.
Yeah, that's great. You can go ahead and share them.
So Walter had said he got punished by getting whoopings, while his sisters got just different punishments. So difference of gender happening can definitely happen in the family. I know that that's happened. Sorry, I got a chaotic household going on, so everybody can kind of relate to working from home and what it's like having kids in the background.
Yeah, I think these are all great. Oh, and then Jaden earlier had said, I'm an adoptee, so that's another layer of potential boundary complications if there's a relationship with the biological family. For adoptees, foster kids, that's a really good point. And thinking about how, our kids treated differently based on whether or not they're, the biological siblings or the biological kids, or if they are, if they've been adopted or if they're foster kids. I'm really glad you brought that point up, because as parents and caregivers, we really want to do our best to treat all of them with the care that they need individually, and making sure that we're giving them what they need and what they deserve, and treating them with the respect in all of those ways, and not comparing negatively simply because maybe they have a different relationship, like they're not biologically related or something like that. Yeah. And Angie says she agrees. She remembers that she was a foster kid, and the real children, or I guess the biological children, were treated extra special. And then I think Jaden also said sexism is bad for men and women. Yeah, so that absolutely. Thank you guys for sharing this. I feel like we're hitting on a lot of really great topics. And then Amanda said, if my kids do well in one subject and another one doesn't, I work with them to, I think, to get better on those topics. And so it kind of goes back to what Miss Angie was saying of, if someone gets an award or a certificate for something, absolutely celebrate that. You can full on celebrate them, but it doesn't have to do anything with your other kids too. You can still celebrate them for different things. And as long as we're not saying, oh, your sister got this, I'm so disappointed you didn't get it, or this, saying things like that. As long as we're not comparing them together, we absolutely should celebrate the individual things that each of our kids are doing. So, wow, thank you guys so much for all that conversation. That was really great. We're going to go ahead and jot down some ideas too. So we're going to be in the middle part of that worksheet. And under the first important idea, it says, Comparing our children to each other, either positively or negatively, harms all the children in the family. It causes resentment, pressure, guilt, and competition. Instead of comparing, deal with each child individually, whether to acknowledge an accomplishment or to give correction or direction. So we're going to write some more statements. Let's say one child has a messy room and needs to go clean it up. How could you address this without having a comparison? So the example that I put was, before we can go to the park, you'll need to pick up all your dirty clothes and put them in the hamper. So I'm just giving a direction to one child. I am in no way saying, well, your room needs to look like your sister's before you can go to the park or something like that. So making it just directed towards that one child. And then for B, maybe a sibling has, or I'm sorry, maybe someone has a clean room, but has a sibling with a messy room. You could just say, I'm impressed with your well-organized room. And again, don't mention the sibling. You can either give a direction or give a compliment specifically for that one child without incorporating their siblings at all. So take a minute or two and jot down some ideas that you have to respond to those. And of course, if you want to share your answer, you can. It looks like a couple things in the chat. What if the sibling is the one who is comparing themselves to their counterpart? Oh, that's a good point. So maybe you aren't saying anything, but they're kind of naturally doing that. I would say that's a great time to remind them that they're an individual and say, you know, I'm not worried about in this moment what your brother or sister is doing. I'm just focusing on what you need to get done or what your accomplishment is. And I think the best thing you can do is reiterate to them that there's no comparisons and model that and making sure that you aren't, without realizing, saying comparisons. So I would verbalize that and just say, yeah, you know, I'm seeing you as an individual and this is what we're focusing on right now. We're not talking about, we're comparing to that sibling. And then Walter said he maybe gives compliments in private so they're not around everyone. That's definitely a way to do it too. Awesome, those are great. Thanks guys for bringing those topics up. I want to give you a break soon, so we're going to go ahead and move on to the next section just for the sake of time. So now we're going to go down and talk about giving according to individual need. So I want you to think about this question. Has anyone been caught up in trying to treat your children exactly equal? Like I had a friend, I remember growing up, whose mom, when she would take them school clothes shopping, she would count up all their receipts and divide out exactly how much money she spent on each of their new school clothes and make sure it was like down to the penny or the cent that she spent the exact same amount on them. I remember it kind of drove her crazy a little bit because maybe a new kid needs a winter coat and the other one doesn't. So it's not always going to work out like that. But that's kind of an example I thought of, is focusing exactly on how much money you're spending on each child. Has anyone been in a situation like that where you felt like, oh man, I'm going crazy trying to do everything exactly equal? Yeah, and Walter says, my children are not equal. I do try to spend the same, but some kids are older and clothes cost more. That's perfect. So you're like, I'm going to shoot for, you know, this amount of money that I'm going to spend on each kid. But realizing, oh, if my kids are teenagers, some of their stuff might actually be a little bit more expensive than maybe if I have a 5-year-old. Their clothes may not cost as much. And so, yeah, just realizing, oh, we're going to try to go for the same amount roughly, but keeping in mind that it's going to look slightly different because things cost different. Equity and equality are naturally different. Yep, Jaden said that. So equality is having things be exactly the same. Equity is giving what each child needs. Like I said before, if one child has outgrown their winter coat, they need a new coat. If the other child has a perfectly good one, they don't need one. So that child's not going to get one. That would be equity, is giving them actually what they need.
And before that, Miss Angie said
yes.
she has to keep everything equal. So she tries to do that with her kiddos, it sounds like.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I think that a lot of people, I can relate to that. If that's, a lot of us try to do that. And I don't think, honestly, that that is necessarily a bad thing in and of itself, because that means that we really value each kid and we want them to feel like they're being treated fairly. So I think that that makes so much sense. And then kind of when it comes down to it, realizing, oh man, they need different things sometimes. But absolutely, I think there's a lot of people that can relate on that. Okay, so one thing to consider is treating your children as individuals when it comes to giving, is giving according to the individual needs of the child. So if we really truly view our kids as individuals, we're going to give according to what they need. And that does not mean, of course, we don't, give treats or surprises here and there, because that keeps things fun. But our kids are going to need different things. And so that's just a reality. So I want you to think about kind of this question. If you were to ask a child, if you have two kids, you ask one of them, say they're hungry for a snack and they're going to have grapes. Would you like a big bunch of grapes or a little bunch? They get to choose. Maybe one says, oh, I'm not very hungry, I just want a couple grapes. And then you might ask the other child, how about you? Do you feel like a big bunch or a little bunch? This is a really, really simple example, but I think it goes to show how excuse me, kids are also able to recognize that they don't need always the same amount. And so if a child is really hungry, they're going to want maybe more of a snack or more of a treat. But if the other child is able to recognize, oh, you know what, I don't need that much right now. Instead of counting out, each kid gets 10 grapes. We can ask them and we can realize, oh, this child is more hungry than this child, or just kind of like a funny little example, but just really keeping in mind that what kids need is going to be different in a lot of ways. So we're going to go to that third category. And this is actually, I remember Miss Angie, you had said a question in the chat. Raven, or actually Miss Angie, do you want to go ahead and repeat that question that you had that related to treating kids individually? Because I want to make sure we touch on it before we move on. Something about your two teenagers who are really close in age.
Yeah, they're close in age, and it's, if I do want something for one, they want me to do it for the other. And yeah, they just want to keep it fair, and they're the ones that are putting that on me. And so in return, I'm kind of trained to kind of like, okay, well, if I give him $100, I have to give her $100 for Christmas or whatever.
Sure.
Everything has to be
fair.
Or they're putting it on me that I favoring one over the other, or that I think one is more important than the other.
Absolutely. I think that makes so much sense. And I think the example you gave, like for Christmas gifts, for example, I think in that scenario, if you give a child a certain amount of money for Christmas, it probably does make sense to give the other children in your family the same amount, because that's a very tangible comparison and it's a gift. It's not really based on need, probably. That's just based on, this is a gift I'm giving you. And so I think that if we're just giving those gifts freely, for holidays or for birthdays or, different things like that, in that sense, it completely makes sense to make it equal, in my opinion. And then I think when we were talking about giving according to individual need, that kind of focuses a lot more on maybe there's just something outside of gifts and things like that child needs. Maybe one of your child is on the dance team and they need money to pay for their uniform to be on that dance team, but your other child isn't in a sport right now in this season and they don't need to pay for a uniform. So you're not going to buy your daughter a uniform and then give your son the same amount of money that you spent on her uniform, because in that scenario, they don't need that at the same time. So I totally 100% agree and resonate when you're like, yeah, if I give one of them this amount, I got to give this amount if you're giving a gift. But I think in other scenarios, we can reevaluate and think, okay, this child in this moment needs this. So financially, I have to put it towards this. But this child actually in this season doesn't need it, but they're probably going to need something later that this other child doesn't need. So there's kind of lots of ways to think about it. But I'd love to open it up. Does anyone want to share about what they
Can I
think?
interject though?
Of course,
Because
yeah.
let's say, you know, one of my children has a hobby and I buy them something special for their hobby. And then the other one would rather have the money to pick out their own hobby item.
Sure.
So I've just opted to just give them cash and say, you buy whatever you want
Sure.
with the cash. And, you know, as much as I'd want to give them extra gifts, I feel stuck because,
Yeah.
you know, I can't buy one something special and give the other one something special without like, and then when it comes to like what they need, like my son, he's going to get his driver's license first. He's going to get money for a car, or he's going to get a car, and she's going to say, what about me? You're going to pay that much for a car for me, right? Or, you know, like it's all about, you know, figuring out dollars and cents and what's fair and what's equal.
Yeah.
It's really impossible task, and somebody's always disappointed, and I'd really
Yeah.
like to be able to have a good response and say, you know, you guys are individuals and you don't need the same thing. I mean, like what you're saying sounds good in class, but in the face of children that are just venoming and drooling
Sure.
out about wanting what they want, it's really tough.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Jaden, I see that your hand's up. Maybe he has a thought that he wants to add to this. Go ahead.
I just wanted to mention, referencing back to last week,
Sure.
my wife and I have decided we're going to start doing family meeting on Friday. And I feel like, you know, they're not teenagers yet, but they are close in age. So this is the sibling rivalry is a thing.
Mhm.
And I think that rather than allowing myself to be stressed and overwhelmed, which, I mean, let's face it, I don't know if I can stop that anyway. I'm thinking that might be a good opportunity for me to try and allow the kids to feel that they have a voice in negotiating some of these things on their own, and we could talk them out rather than feeling like the onus is on me to be the arbiter of goodwill.
Sure. Yes, I'm so glad that you brought that up. And I think family meetings can be a great time to discuss these types of things. Absolutely. I am so sorry. I am so loving this conversation right now. Like you guys are bringing up so many things. For the sake of time and just being able to respect everyone's time, I would love to give you guys a 10-minute break, just because I do know that I want us to be able to get out on time tonight. But we can absolutely like follow up on this conversation later. And if there's ever things that you're like want to talk more specifically about in regards to my children are struggling with this specifically, Samantha and I are always free to have a phone chat or come by our office hours, because we can't solve everyone's problems in class, even though I so wish that we could. We love talking about these things. So I'm going to go ahead and give us a break, and not to cut off this conversation, but just to kind of put it on pause and maybe readdress it later. But it is 7:57, so let's come back at 8:07 and we will go ahead and keep moving forward. But again, if you still want to kind of chat more about these individual things, please feel free to reach out to Samantha or I or Raven individually, and we're so happy to chat with you. So we'll see you back in 10 minutes. Grab your books and make sure we're ready to keep moving forward. For the sake of time, we will probably move a little bit quicker through some of the rest of this content just to make sure we have time to cover it. But like I said before, if you do have really specific questions, we're always here during the work days. You can give us a call, or coming to our office hours would be a great time to kind of chat about individual things too, because they're so important and we love getting to discuss them, but we also want to make sure we get through our curriculum too. So thank you all for sharing all that stuff. I really appreciate it. All right, so just the very last part of this is we're going to go ahead and respond to some of these questions. So for number 3, the important idea is trying to treat children equally can wear a parent out. And I think that totally makes sense. If we're trying to do, exactly the same for each child, it can be exhausting. I think as Angie even said, it feels impossible, which I think lots of people can relate to. And instead, giving your time and attention to fit each one's individual needs. So let's say, for example, write down a time when you tired yourself out trying to treat your children equally. So maybe an example would be trying to make Christmas presents look equal when they ask for different things. So maybe your children want, different items for Christmas, but those items maybe cost different amounts of money. That could be hard to try to figure out how to make that work, I guess, could be one example. And then what could you have done differently in the situation above in order to give time and attention to the individual needs of the child? This is kind of a fun little poem that you could try using if this specific scenario relates to you. So if kids are asking for different presents, it'll mean they get different presents. So there's a poem that goes, something they want, something they need, something they wear, and something to read. So everyone gets one thing they want. They get something they need. And maybe one child gets pants and one child gets a new jacket, something they wear, and then something to read. So again, just kind of using that as a way to balance, how you treat you attempt to make things feel equal for your kids, but also are meeting the needs of them individually. So go ahead and jot down something for that, and then we'll move forward.
Sorry, I was putting baby to bed, so I'm reading this. So do I just put like a hypothetical thing if I only have one kid, or?
Yeah. I was kind of cutting off when you first started talking, but were you saying you only have one child, so it feels hard to answer some of these? Is that what you were saying? Uh-oh. I'm sorry, I can't really hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so if you if you only have one child, you can totally make it hypothetical, or you can think even you can relate this back to when you were a kid and maybe you felt like, oh, my parents didn't treat us equally, or they did. You can relate it to yourself as a child, or you can make a hypothetical, just kind of whatever works for you. All right, the next thing we're going to do is go to this handout, 6.1.2, and it's titled Treating Children as Individuals at the top. So I'll give you a second to go ahead and find that page. I'm just going to read that top section really quickly. It's important to recognize each child's uniqueness. Each has strengths and weaknesses. At this station or on this worksheet, you're going to fill in the chart as you note the special characteristics and needs of each of your children. Both of you should complete worksheets on your respective families. Take this worksheet back with you. Use it as a reference as you think about responding to the needs of your individual children. So we're going to get to go through and think about each of our kids. So if you only have one child, you would only really need to fill this out once. If you have 2 children, and there's already 2 sections for you. And if you have more than that, you can write the rest on a piece of notebook paper or divide these boxes into smaller sections. But I'm going to kind of go through what these different categories are and then give some examples of things you could write. So obviously in that first box there is the child's name that you would write. And then you're going to write some personal strengths and talents of this child. Then you're going to add some encouraging words to say to this child about his strengths, and then challenges or struggles this child deals with. Encouraging words to say to this child about his struggles. So you can kind of be thinking in the back of your mind, what are strengths of my children and what are things that I could do to encourage them in that way? I am going to share this example really quickly and then give you guys just a little bit of time to jot down some ideas for each of your kids. So for this, I put Stella, and some of Stella's personal strengths and talents are that she's a master animal trainer. She can make really amazing salsa, and she remembers and passes down family traditions like recipes. So I'd encourage you, be really creative on this. Think about, you know, what are things that might seem kind of small, like maybe making salsa doesn't seem like a huge thing, but in reality, like that's actually a really cool thing that she has a unique talent for. So try to think about small stuff that really makes them unique and those little strengths and talents that they have. Maybe your child is just really good at art and they're really great at specifically painting or something like that. Adding that in there would be fun. So some encouraging words to say to your child about their strengths. You could say, you keep our family history alive. You are so patient with dogs, and I learn a lot from you. I think it can be really beneficial when we let our kids know that they bring a lot and they contribute a lot. So thinking about how, oh, you're saying that they're really good at this and that I actually am learning from you, that can be a huge thing. And then complimenting her salsa. So this salsa is so yummy. I want you to teach me how to make it sometime. Okay. And then challenges or struggles. Oh, McKenna, I just saw that you raised your hand. Did you have a question?
Yeah, so because my daughter's like 18 months old, so it's kind of harder to do like strengths or talents. So like for that, that like she really likes, it would be easy to like incorporate to motivate her instead.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you said that, because if our kids are super young, sometimes these things feel harder to kind of pin down a little bit because we're still getting to know their personalities and know what they like and what they're good at and all of that. So yeah, maybe right now she really likes books, and you could even say a strength of hers or a talent would be that she really likes reading. I mean, you don't know that she'll love reading when she gets older, but you do know that she has an interest in books. So I think you can totally put down things that like she enjoys, and that would fall under strengths. Does that make sense? Hopefully that answers that. If not, you can let me know and I can help you kind of figure out what to write there. So now we're going to go to some challenges or struggles. So Stella loves to sleep until 1 p.m. That's maybe a struggle that we're going through with her, and then she's a teenager. And so of course, that's what teenagers like to do, is to sleep late. Excuse me. So some encouraging words you could say. I'm so grateful that you got up early today to help me do the yard work. It really means a lot to me when you help me with these chores. So maybe there's one Saturday where maybe she got up a couple hours early and you made a point to really, really notice that and congratulate her for that. So just making a point to celebrate when the child does do something really well, I think is a huge deal. So does anyone have any questions about this, or would you like to share maybe some things that came to mind for you for any of these categories? I know that sometimes when people share out loud, it kind of gives other people ideas as well. And then Walter, I just saw your message. I know you haven't received your workbook yet. I did mail it. I think it's just taken a while to get there. So you can either jot this down on a piece of notebook paper for now and then transfer it once you get your workbook, or you could wait and fill it out once you get your workbook. So you will have to complete it, but you could just write it down on a notebook paper for now, if that works for you.
So like for this one, because this one's also kind of difficult because they're doing the first one different. So like,
Sure.
I put on some fun music or sing a song about the task at hand, like the Peanut song. Does that like kind of fit what I need to put there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great idea. And Jaden said he's offered to buy the kids some stocks in lieu of gifts or allowance. Oh, how interesting. I like that idea. Anyone else want to share about encouraging words or strengths or anything like that?
I can, if it's okay for me to speak right now.
Yeah, of course it is.
Okay. Well, as you guys know, or at least most of you, I don't know who wasn't in this group last week. I just started, but I have 6 children. Oldest being 19, youngest is 11. And each one of them are all totally different. Like my oldest son, he's a writer. He writes poetry, he writes books. He's a writer. I'm also a writer. I'm a content creator. And he's very good at writing, even though some of the stuff he writes is very dark, but I see the potential in what he writes. My son under him, not really sure. He's my oldest son, but our relationship isn't very strong like it should have been. He's a little bit distant, but I know he's really good with video games and he's a great driver. My son under him is autistic, but he's also very creative. He creates a lot of stuff. And he's very meticulous like I am. I have a daughter. She loves to cook. She's actually a really good cook that like she wakes up and she insists that she cooks breakfast for us.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, my daughter under her, she's an artist. She likes to paint. She's into astrophotography like I am. So she likes to take pictures of the stars, and like she's really young. She's like 13 years old and she's really good at what she do, like taking pictures of the stars. You have people that's 30, 40 years old, they can't take a picture of the stars, and she's 13 and she takes pictures that could be in National Geographic.
That's amazing.
And then I have another son that's underneath her. He's also a little more difficult to read. But I like to think that his strengths also, you know, he likes to play. I don't know what it is about the boys in the video games, but that's what he's into. And these kids are really good, you know, like I've been playing Mortal Kombat since 1993, 1994, and these little young kids, they be whooping up on me sometimes, and I'll be like, hey, I'd have been playing this game since I was your age, and nope, they're really good, but most of my boys, at least 2 of them, they're really into video games. My oldest son likes to drive. He's really good at it. I could trust him. And everybody else just has like their own thing. My oldest daughter, she doesn't really like to watch TV. She likes to read. She's really into that. But I just wanted to share that.
Oh, amazing. It sounds like you really, really know each of your kids. And it seems like it was very natural and easy for you to come up with things that they were talented at.
It's just weird having 6 children and realizing that all 6 of them are totally different. And a lot of them don't even share the same interests, except for the boys that like to play the video games. But I hate reading. Reading is a way for me to go to sleep. I want to fall asleep, I'll pick up a book.
Yeah, I don't think you're alone in that. But how cool that you have a daughter that really loves that and you're able to kind of call that out in her and encourage her in that. I love that.
Oh yeah. My youngest daughter, she can calculate. Now, I'm gonna tell you, I suck at math. Math is not my forte, never been good at it. I need a calculator sometimes just to calculate 2-digit numbers. My math skills are pretty deficient. I have a daughter, my youngest daughter. She can calculate 3-digit multiplication numbers in her head faster than I could type it into a calculator.
Wow.
I'll ask her 2 3-digit numbers and she'll give me the answer before I can get it typed in and get the answer.
Oh, that's so impressive.
So yeah.
It sounds like a math whiz. That's amazing. It's also not my strength. So I really respect that when people are good at that. That's amazing. Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for sharing all of that. I'm sure that gave other people some insight and some ideas of things to write down too. Thank you. Yeah. Anyone else? We only have about 5 minutes left, but I'd love to hear anyone else want to share anything from any of these categories, encouraging words, anything like that.
I had another question.
Sure.
Again, mine's kind of different than everybody else's. I'm not really sure what to put in like the end category because really all she has for like challenges or struggles is stuff that's age related, not like struggle. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
distracted or stuff like that. So I'm not really sure what to put for encouraging words to say about her struggles.
Sure. So what's so you said she's 18 months, right? What's kind of a behavioral thing she's going through right now? Is she having a hard time sleeping, or is she throwing tantrums? What's something that's going on that's age appropriate?
She throws tantrums, not super often. I mean, she always sleeps through the night. And she's kind of stubborn, I guess. I don't know. She's like so easy. Yeah, I guess she occasionally throws a tantrum.
Yeah, well, I would encourage everyone, don't overthink this too much. If she's in a stage where you're like, you know what, sometimes she throws these tantrums, you could write that down, even if it's not all the time, just for the sake of this, that could be something. And then encouraging words, I think you could even just say something like, in the moments when she's really calm and she's being very kind and respectful, saying, you know, I love it when you say such nice things to mom, or it means so much to me when we can sit and play together, and just really kind of encouraging those moments where she's not doing that behavior, if that makes sense. It can be something very simple like that. Does that seem to help at all?
I think so.
Okay, let me know if you have more questions. And Amanda, go ahead and share.
Well, my son is like 4 years old and he has issues with communicating and stuff like that, his feelings. So for encouraging behavior and stuff, I just like encourage him to use like his emotions, like modeling them, and like because he has issues with speaking and stuff, like he has speech delay. So that's one thing that I do with him, because a lot of times when he's angry and stuff, like he'll go to like bite, or he'll head bang and stuff like that. Like I said, my son has some behavioral issues.
Yeah.
So I just encourage him like that. And when he does like share with his brother, I say, thank you for sharing. That's really nice of you. Just giving like really good positive feedback. I try to ignore like the negative behavior, because I feel the more that I draw attention to it, the more he's gonna do it. So that may be very helpful too. I'm not sure what her name was that she was just on, but that might be helpful for her too, because like our kids may be kind of close in age there.
Absolutely.
And my 2-year-old also has some issues, like when his brother may steal something from him, instead of like asking for it back, he'll like grab it or smack him or something like that. So I just say to him like, hey, Cerulean, that's not how we ask. We need to like, you need to ask brother if like you can have that, instead of just taking it from him. That's not how we share. This is how we share, and I model it. Modeling is key with kids.
Yes, 100%. That's so true. They kind of pick up on everything that we do. So the more positive things that we model, the more effective that's going to be for them. Thank you. Well, I just want to say thank you, all of you, for sharing. I feel like we had such rich and amazing discussions tonight, and you all were so awesome about sharing about your kids and what's going on with them. And I wish we could talk about it forever. So we will kind of continue some stuff about siblings and things like that on a Wednesday. But again, if you have more specific individual questions that you want to chat with one of us about, please come to our office hours. But I was just saying, if you have individual questions or things like that, please always feel free to reach out to us. And you are all free to go for the evening. I hope you have a great night. Raven and I will be on for just a few minutes tonight if there's anything we can do for you. But if there's not, then we'll plan to see you on Wednesday. And Jaden, I do see that your hand's up. So if you have something you want to share, feel free.
I know everybody's logging off, but I think we need to remember that we live in a life-size mirror, and we have the power to make the reflections better or worse depending on how we react to any situation. And some days are easier, and some days are not easier.
Absolutely.
But, not only that, there's resources like this out there, and we have to be willing to use them. I mean, even for those of us with nothing, we just gotta do the work to find them so we can get what we need. Because otherwise, we can't be the best parents we can be if we're not taking advantage of the resources and help that's available.
Yes. Oh, I'm so glad. That's a great way to end. I'm really glad that you brought that up. Thank you.
I had something else I need to ask you, but I'll wait till everybody's off.
Sure, yeah, I'll stop sharing my screen, and then I will stop our recording too, so that we're all done with class.